Welcome, everybody, to the Mormon Newscast. It's Monday, July 20th, 2026. I'm here, Bill Reel, with Radio Free Mormon. How are you this evening?
Greetings, Bill. I hope you're well.
Excellent. One of us is blocky, by the way, and we're going to have to figure out who it is. So, audience, if you'll let me know if it's RFM that's glitching or if it's me that's glitching, we'd really like to know that. But in the meantime, I'll just note that you don't see Rebecca Biblioteca here. Rebecca is in Spain. It's 2:00 in the morning there. She did get up. She did do her hair. She did get in front of the camera. I got into studio a little early to see if her technology was going to hold up. It looks like no fault of hers that her internet speed. Oh, it says me. It says I'm the one glitching.
Oh no.
I'll refresh here in just a second. I'll just say that she tried to make her stuff work and it didn't. So she's not going to be with us tonight. And if it's working right now, I won't refresh it. If I'm still glitching RFM or if the audience thinks I am, please say something. Otherwise, we'll go from there. I will put up on the screen here as our thumbnail. We do have a breaking story tonight that we do need to talk about. An armed man was arrested in the Orem Stake Center. As far as I know, this happened sometime yesterday. And I'm going to go to the next slide here and just note that this is covered on a YouTube channel called Send Me Saints or Send Me, and you can listen to the full story over there. I'll give you just a quick rundown, which is that people show up for their ward meetings, unless it was a state conference. I don't think it was because there were kids in the nursery. So it was a ward meeting, and as people are making their way into the chapel, a gentleman in all black sits down on the love seat, takes a gun and sets it on the seat next to him and puts his hand on it. Doesn't threaten anybody, doesn't say anything. People sort of pretended they didn't notice, and they went into the chapel, and a decision was made for everybody to leave going out the other direction. So that's what happened. But nobody from leadership chose to go tell the kids down in primary and the leaders that were with them that was happening. So the gentleman who left immediately because his kids were in primary went around the building, went in the other side, and went into the nursery and told those kids in primary nursery and the leaders there what was going on and that they all needed to exit down that side hallway. And so that happened. The police showed up. They arrested the man. And we don't have any other feedback besides that, but that is the story. And if you do want to hear that full story, there's a YouTube channel from a believing Latter-day Saint. It is, I'll put this up on the screen here. It is this one right here on the left-hand side. And again, it's on a YouTube channel called Send Me. And his moniker is Send Me Saints. So if you look up either of those, then click videos, it'll be his newest video up there. But they've got a thing with evacuate a gunman in the LDS chapel. So, and they're saying he was in the chapel, but I think it was in the foyer outside the chapel, if I'm not mistaken, because everybody leaving sort of acted as if they didn't see him and didn't know that he had a gun. They did know. I mean, they all talked about it and left, but nobody got hurt. There were no threats made. Not sure if it was a mental issue or what else was going on, but that's the case. There are some other little details about this story, though. The church sent out first, Rebecca wanted me to make sure you guys knew that this is about a mile away from where Charlie Kirk was assassinated in Orem, Utah. You can see Utah Valley University, UVU, up in the top left-hand corner. The red marker there in the center is the stake center where this happened at. And then she was going to play clips and talk about those, but I'm not going to do that. I'll just note this statement came through church leadership. So this was an official message from the local leaders, but they had been in contact with church leadership. And so I'm going to read this. Orem, Utah, Lakeview Stake. Dear brothers and sisters, this morning at 10:45 a.m., an individual was observed with a gun in the stake center foyer. The individual was sitting on the sofa with a gun sitting next to him. The individual was not threatening and no one was harmed. The building was immediately evacuated and Orem police responded promptly. The individual is in custody and will receive a mental health evaluation. Thank you to all who responded promptly to evacuate the building. Now, here's the money line. We ask members to not post information online regarding the incident and allow the church to manage public information. I'll finish here. We would like to remind all members that if you ever observe someone with a weapon or who is acting in a threatening manner, please do not approach the individual. Immediately notify the bishop or another member of the ward or branch leadership. By the way, you definitely should do that, RFM. You should definitely tell the ward leadership what's going on. But if you truly perceive some sort of real threat, shouldn't your first phone call be to police and get law enforcement on the way? I guess you'd want to get people out of there as quick as possible as well. But I think those two things go hand in hand, and I wouldn't waste 10 minutes talking to a bishop or a local leader. I'll just finish here. Let's see. If instructions are given to evacuate the building, please follow directions and immediately return home. We also remind everyone that the church policy states firearms and other lethal weapons are not allowed on church property. This includes concealed weapons. This does not apply to current law enforcement officers. General Handbook 35.5.7.2. They just keep coming up with more numbers for those handbooks because they get bigger and bigger. And it says if you have any questions, you can please refer them, and it goes on, but I don't have the rest of the message there. I will just say that the gentleman in the video who was there when it happened, he's the one who rushes to the other side of the building, goes in and notifies the nursery primary section of the congregation as they're over there doing that part of the meetings, that he went home with tons of regret. He said he normally conceals and carries, and he didn't. And he wishes he did, and he never will not conceal and carry again. I think it's such a strange thing to have the church saying, we don't do that, and to have this ward member going like, yeah, but to solve this issue, somebody needs to have a gun, and he thought he should be the one that does it. Any thoughts from you on this story? I don't think there's any other slides for this. Oh, yeah, there's one other thing, but I'll say it after your comments.
Yeah, a few things. First off, I can understand why a person in his position, that person you were quoting, that ward member, oh, I wish I had my gun with me or whatever. But as it turned out, I don't see how him having his gun with him would have made this turn out better than it did. So I think he should rest his mind on that score at least. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that story can unfold, and once somebody sits down, doesn't belong in that congregation, they're wearing all black and they've got a gun next to them with their hand on it, everybody getting out with no incident at all, with law enforcement arresting him and getting to the bottom of it, it is the best case scenario. So bringing another weapon into the situation almost certainly would have made things worse.
Yeah. I don't think it could have made them better at a minimum. So I think that under the circumstance, it was just, was it even a year ago, Grand Blanc, Michigan? And that crazy man who ran his pickup truck into the chapel and then went in there and started shooting people. This is the situation we are in. This is the society we live in. And I can understand people being very alarmed at seeing this guy come in there, sit down, and put a gun next to him on the love seat in the foyer of the LDS chapel. Now, I am a little bit concerned about people who pretend they don't see what they do see, because I think that happens a lot in society. I think it happens twice as much in Mormon society, which is where we pretend we don't see things that we do see. Now, if it's just ignoring it and thinking, okay, I don't want to confront and I'm going to go do something about it, that's one thing. Okay, I get that. But, I think that a lot of times we pretend we don't see what we see in order to avoid the burden of having to do something about it. What do you think that is about, Bill? You're nodding your head.
Yeah, I'm just noting that the way he told the story was that it was just to not get the guy agitated, not to have him think that they were going to do something about it, and just to play it sort of casual. But the moment they went into the chapel, it sounds like they addressed it. The guy, though, if you watch the video again on this Send Me channel, the guy was sort of caught off guard that he was the first person to notify the primary and nursery that was happening. And so everybody in the chapel gets the let's get out of here message. They all get out, but nobody from ward leadership went down to the primary hallway to talk to those folks. And this gentleman was the first one to notify them and get them out of the building.
I know everybody was, going crazy and not thinking straight, but I think that might be a symbolic representation of how society is different today than it was in the days of the Titanic.
Yeah, not much different.
Because they would get the kids out first, right? Women and children first. But no, the guys, they're booking it. And nobody's looking back except for this one guy. So I want to give credit to the people who were smart enough to do this and go out the other way. I'm really glad anybody could Monday morning quarterback it and suggest improvements, but that was great. I think going back for the kids was probably a good idea too, because who the hell knows what this guy's going to do, right?
Yep, 100%.
And I do think that must have been really exciting, terrifying to have to go back now to the church. I know you're doing it in a worthy cause to get your kids out and the other kids too, and let them know that there's a potentially deranged man with a definite gun in the foyer and he could be anywhere at this point. But how terrifying to know that at any point this guy could come around the corner, guns blazing.
Yeah, he said it was a revolver. Again, my brain immediately goes to that's less shots fired, so it gives me at least a little more knowledge to maybe you want to confront the person, seeing as they would have less damage they could do, and if you're one of the brave ones, then getting out there first sort of maybe limits other people being at risk. But
Are you counting to 6?
What's that?
Are you counting to 6?
Yeah. Well, if I'm the first one in line, I don't think I get to count that high. Either it goes well or it doesn't.
Yeah.
But in a situation like that, if there are a lot of people at risk, either everybody runs and 6 people get shot at, or somebody has to step forward. And maybe it was just nothing. Maybe for whatever, it seems like a strange thing to take a gun out of your pocket, put it on the couch next to you, put your hand on it. But again, there was no incident and police have handled it. Rebecca also noted that someone else in a ward took this photo of another man in church. Now, he might have a cast on perhaps, but that looks like a shoulder holster, isn't it?
Yeah.
And here he is in the middle of, in the cultural hall sitting. You can see kids right in front of him. And he's spending his time looking up guns on the internet. So
I'm sorry, I should say it looks like it could be a shoulder holster. You're right, it could be a cast. Maybe his left arm is in a cast or something, and that's sort of the thing holding the sling in front.
But yeah, here's it appears to be a Mormon who is carrying maybe a cast, but he's carrying and also shopping for his next gun. So there's
it's definitely a Mormon. I can tell this is actually what President Oaks looks like with his jacket off.
There it is. So there's that. And so with that was breaking news. We just found out about that today. Rebecca was going to cover that. Tonight's stories, we've got, I'll be leading off with what was going to be our top story before that one came along the wire. Utah flash flood kills family of 5. And then we've got RFM, you've got a story on Mormon manslaughter. Then the next one will be less coffee, more Jesus. That one's Rebecca's. We'll set that one off to the side. We've got a child sex abuser gets married. I think that's you as well, RFM.
No, that was Rebecca.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So next is LDS Temple updates. That's Rebecca. So now we run down to polygamy deniers, play wait and see. Then next we've got when other churches discover a predator. We might be able to cover that. Is that yours, RFM?
No, that's Rebecca. That CSA abuser gets married. That could be mine. Rebecca. I was working on it, and Rebecca and I were talking about it, and I was thinking I wasn't going to do it. So it's kind of up in the air at this point. I don't even know if there's any slides there.
There may not be. I knew you guys talked about the thing in there. So then we've got Martin's Cove converts to Mormonism, and that I'll be covering that one. And then Rebecca had the last one too, Pono updates. So we'll just see how this goes. And I know you and I talked before the show about a couple of clips, whether we'd use them or not. We might have plenty of time to go into them. So we probably should just plan on it. I'll tackle here this first story. This is this was the headline in some places. I thought, I'll just say this. When things happen, if somebody has a position where they're going to get clicks just by naming their position, Here, for instance, fire captain, wife, 3 sons found dead after flash flood in Utah Canyon. Daughter is family's sole survivor. I don't know why, but it always agitates me that there's a focus on the position that the man holds, whereas sort of the wife and the kids become kind of secondary to the story. And I say that for a reason. I'll get into that in just a moment. But in the story, a devastating flash flood in Wayne County, Utah, claimed the lives of 5 members of one family after heavy rain swept through a canyon near Sunglow Campground on Friday. I think a lot of you have already heard this story, but we wanted to make sure it was covered. The victims were Spencer Long, his wife Katrina Long, and 3 boys, Thane Long, Gage Long, and Reed Vernon. Search and rescue teams recovered the bodies Friday night and Saturday morning after the family was caught in rapidly rising floodwaters. Spencer Long had served with the Provo Fire Department, and Katrina Long was a co-founder of Summit Medical Spa. So there's that. And then one important clarification, because the way a lot of the story got told over the last few days was that this entire family got killed by this flash flood. They have this other daughter who survived, and several of the accounts early on sort of told the story as if she was there too. She lived, they all died, she's the only one left. And so some new data came out. We just want to make sure that people have context on the story. So one important clarification emerged over the weekend as the story spread nationally. Early reporting led many people to believe that all 3 boys were Spencer and Katrina Long's sons. Family members have since explained that Reed Vernon was not Spencer Long's biological son. Reed and his surviving sister Lydia are the children of Katrina and her ex-husband Joshua Vernon. After Katrina married Spencer Long, Spencer became their stepfather and helped raise them. Lydia, who's an adult, was working as a nurse in Kentucky and was not on the camping trip. She is now traveling home with her father and stepmother to join the rest of the family in mourning. The tragedy has prompted an outpouring of grief from across Utah. Spencer Long was remembered as a respected firefighter, mentor, and friend, while Katrina was honored as a successful businesswoman, former Mona City council member, adventurer, talked a lot about her doing a lot of outdoor stuff, and a community leader who had touched countless lives. Friends and family have described the Longs as deeply devoted parents who consistently put their family first. That is, what's going on here? There we go. So there's that. And then I'll just note, it looks like Reed, who also passed away, had just come back from his mission not too long ago. His Facebook page still showed that he was serving a mission for the church. And then I will note too, for folks who are here in Utah and live out that way, if there's a branded barber shop out there, Cuts That Carry, and they're donating 100% of all of their profits from the Nephi location to this cause. So if you're out that way and you need a haircut, that might be a good way to send a little bit that way. They also, I believe, have a GoFundMe going as well. And then I just wanted to finish off this story. I live down here in southern Utah. We've got Zion National Park right here close by. There are so many warnings about these canyons and rain turning immediately into flash floods. And so I just want to say here, the heartbreaking story is also another sobering reminder of how dangerous Utah's slot canyons and mountain drainages can be during monsoon season. A canyon that appears completely safe can transform into a deadly torrent within minutes from rainfall that occurs miles away and may not even be visible from where hikers are standing. Every summer, officials urge people to check the weather, monitor flash flood forecast, and avoid narrow canyons whenever storms are possible. Sadly, this tragedy is another example of how quickly nature can turn catastrophic. I'll say, and I'll show in this next video, you can have a rainstorm miles away. It can be completely clear where you're at, and suddenly it can turn into something deadly. And so I'm going to take this down just as a warning to folks that you can get a sense of how fast this happens. You'll notice in this, there's no rain. You're not hearing any bad weather. The rainstorm is quite a ways away. And as the rain hits the mountains in a lot of places in Utah, certainly a lot of them down here in southern Utah, but there's plenty up in north as well. You can just be minding your own business, and within a matter of a minute, your life is in danger. So I just wanted to play this so folks can get a feel for how fast this happens, as a reminder to just be careful out there. So let me turn the sound on. Sprinkling, but it's not raining. It happened every year here in Utah. Just about, there are people who lose their life because they're sleeping at night on some low ground that is in one of these slot canyons, and it just takes in a matter of seconds, minutes at most, for it to become a dangerous situation. Any thoughts from you on the story, or on sort of the risk that people take unknowingly when they take spaces that are affected by heavy rainfall like that?
It's tragic. It's terrible. And the fact this was he's a fire captain. I don't know. I just think that someone who's a fire captain would have more knowledge about, being safe and avoiding situations like that than your regular person.
Yeah, I don't know what the camp spot was that they took refuge for the night. I don't know if it was at the bottom of a slot canyon like that, or
Mm.
if it was just in a low place of ground. But uh, somebody said that it was just a matter of minutes before wherever they were at, it became life threatening, and
Yeah.
unfortunately took their lives. So,
Well,
uh,
if a fire captain and his family are in danger, it confirms me in my belief that not camping is the best thing for Radio Free Mormon.
yeah, that's one way to avoid it entirely, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that is a horrific thing. So, folks, if you do have the ability, there's that opportunity to get a haircut and send some money that way. Like I said, they also have a GoFundMe. I'll try to find that here before the show's over and put that in the show notes. But with that, I'll turn the time over to Mr. Radio Free Mormon for his story.
Thank you.
Follows.
Thank you very much, Bill. Yeah, this is a strange story, a horrific story in a different way than the story that Bill just reported on. The headline is "Or a Man to Spend Up to 20 Years in Prison for Pushing BYU Student Girlfriend to Commit Suicide." The original article is Jeremy Toombs, Fox 13. This is from July 17th. And I also went and looked at several other sources that covered it as well. And I took information from other sources and put it in here. So it covers pretty much the entire story. The thumbnail is that this beautiful young BYU student, smart, valedictorian in her high school, pre-med at BYU, hooks up with this guy. And they're together for 8 months. There's physical abuse. There's definitely emotional abuse. There's punishing emotional abuse. And then when he has her down as far as she can be and knows that she's already got suicidal ideations, puts a gun down, a loaded gun down in their apartment, and leaves it in a place where she can see it. He leaves the room, and then she goes to the gun and uses it the way he wanted her to. So he ends up pleading guilty to manslaughter and 3 other crimes, okay? And he gets 5 years, which is the max on each one, to run consecutively. That's where the 20 years comes from. All right. As you can imagine, this is a very unusual use of the manslaughter statute in Utah or anywhere else, to my knowledge. Generally, manslaughter is, if you're out there shooting indiscriminately in a crowd or something, or maybe you're shooting at a place where it's reckless because there's an orphanage on the other side of the trees from your target. And a reasonable person should know that. And you end up, nailing one of the orphans while they're at recess. So that's something that would usually be manslaughter. You didn't intend to kill anybody, but you acted either recklessly or negligently, and you ended up killing somebody just the same. Recklessness is a more severe degree of manslaughter. Here in Washington, that would be manslaughter 1. Acting negligently would be less serious, but still a very serious crime. Acting negligently and killing someone, that would be manslaughter 2. And then above that, you have the murder charges. There's murder 1 with premeditation and murder 2 with intent. So you've got premeditation, intent, reckless, and negligent. And that's how they shake out in Washington. Dateline, Provo, Utah. The Orem man who pleaded guilty to manslaughter after pushing his girlfriend to commit suicide will serve up to 20 years in prison after being sentenced on Friday, which was last Friday. Caleb Riess, that's the guy's name, Caleb Riess, R-E-E-S, appeared in 4th Judicial District Court in Provo for his sentencing hearing, 3 months after agreeing to a plea deal in the death of Rena Nien, period. Judge Sean M. Peterson handed down sentences of 0 to 5 years for each of the 4 charges that Riess had pleaded guilty to. Along with manslaughter, Riess also pleaded guilty to 2 counts of possession of a firearm by a restricted person. I wonder why he was restricted. And 1 count of possession of a controlled substance. The judge says, I've seen and heard some of the saddest and hardest situations imaginable. This case was different for a lot of reasons. It's a case I frankly find disturbing, said Judge Sean M. Peterson before announcing the sentence. The sentences will run consecutively, which does mean back to back, not concurrently or at the same time. Nien died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound on October 1st, 2021. An investigation showed that Riess was aware his 20-year-old girlfriend was in a mental health crisis and that she had texted a friend earlier in the day threatening to commit suicide. That's what I mean. He knew she was having suicidal ideations when he did this. After the friend called police about Nien's suicide threat. So Nien calls the friend calls the police, right? And now Riess, this defendant who just pleaded guilty, comes back into the scene. An officer called to check on her health, which upset Riess, the guy, sparking an argument between the couple that was captured on one of many audio records made by Nien without the knowledge of Riess. Thanks, Rena, for ruining my life. Riess was later heard on the audio recording while singing in a mocking tone as he made arrangements for her to be moved out of their home. That's Rena's parents there at a press conference on the right. Prosecutors, this is what he looked like closer to the time of the event. Prosecutors claim that after Riess berated Nien, he left a loaded handgun on a table in their bedroom within her line of sight before walking out of the room. During an audio recording, a muffled sound of movement was heard while Riess was on the phone with his mother, followed by a gunshot. Nien had accused Riess of domestic violence and sexual assault and had moved out to stay in a shelter at some point. She had previously threatened to break up with Riess over accusations that he sold drugs. 20-year-old Rena Nien was a BYU pre-med student at the time of her death. She died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound on October 1st, 2021. Her boyfriend Riess was subsequently charged with domestic violence manslaughter. This is an attorney for Nien's family, Richard Lambert, speaking. Though Rena pulled the trigger, Riess was charged criminally with causing her death by deliberately driving her to a point of desperation and despair that led to the fatal act. Yen, a biology student at Brigham Young University, had been dating Riess for about 10 months until her death on October 1st, 2021. According to the Salt Lake Tribune, prosecutors did not charge Riess with manslaughter until 3 years later when a private investigator hired by Nyen's family uncovered recordings on her phone from the night of her suicide. And apparently, when the prosecutors were presented with those recordings, they decided to go ahead and file charges. Okay. That is the end of that story. It's an awful story. Apparently, this guy he took a plea deal and he got sentenced to up to 20 years. What are your thoughts about that story, Bill? Ever heard of anything like that before in a criminal court?
Not in a criminal court. I was going to share, I've shared it with you before and shared it with, members of an audience who've watched those shows that I've talked about it. But when I served as a bishop, I had a non-member middle-aged woman come see me. Her husband was an inactive member of our church, and he was just in the process of trying to work on becoming active again. He was starting to show up at church again, and the ward council had made a concerted effort to try to get him back into activity. And she came and talked to me. I was the bishop at the time, and explained to me that one of the things that he had done just in the recent day or two when she came to see me was that he walked into the room and set a gun on the table and told her to kill herself. And, and was now telling me as if, now I'm the bishop. And so I've got to somehow handle this. My recommendation was for her to get out of the home, that she wasn't safe there. And that anybody who says that to another person isn't ever going to provide a healthy relationship. But she wasn't in the mindset to be acting on it, but he was 100% wanting her to do it and putting the gun on the table with his own mind, wanting her to. In this instance, you have somebody who is in a rough moment of their life and feeling a lot of despair. And it is such obviously it's such an egregiously unhealthy thing to do, but when you take someone who's already got some fragility to them and you compound that by treating them like crap and saying really harsh things and telling them to do such a thing as take their life. I'm glad that the private investigator found the recording. I'm glad he was charged, and I'm glad that he'll serve time. It may be one of the only things in life that'll get a person like that to consider what their actions do and to make the kinds of changes that he needs to make.
Very good. Well, back to you, Bill. Hopefully we'll have something, a little more upbeat coming up.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to skip ahead here. The next couple of stories are Rebecca's. So this one here, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints may soon become the owner of one of the most sacred locations in Mormon pioneer history, Martin's Cove. Martin's Cove is 55 miles southwest of Casper, Wyoming. I was looking that up today. I knew it was involved in the Willie and Martin Handcart Company, and I'd heard of Martin's Cove before, but I didn't know the history behind it. So I went and read up on it. It's essentially where the Willie and Martin Handcart Company stopped when the weather got really bad and they couldn't continue on. They stopped in Martin's Cove until the weather cleared. If you remember right, folks, the William Martin Handcart Company left way too late in the season, but they left anyway, and it proved to be disastrous to them. So right now, the site is owned by the federal government and managed through a long-term lease with the church, but that lease expires in 2029. An independent nonprofit has proposed a land swap. By the way, I want to know about this independent nonprofit. An independent nonprofit has proposed a land swap where the church would receive the 933-acre Martin's Cove property in exchange for another 933 acres of a nearby ranch where the land, the church already owns it. So if you were wondering why the church buys up so much land, it's for bartering, maybe. Maybe that's what it's for. The proposal, please.
Having a large real estate portfolio never hurts.
It never, no, it puts you on top of every possible deal. You can buy anything in this world with money and apparently with land. So the church appears to be in negotiations trying to make this swap, and there is a third party involved. The proposal would still need congressional approval, but supporters say it would create a permanent solution instead of relying on renewable federal leases.
Yes, and then they won't have to worry about staffing it either. We'll take care of it with volunteer missionaries.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, we'll get rid of the 933 acres of farmland, and now we'll own this, and we'll be responsible for it. And if if you could say a lot of things about the church, but it at least seems to be mildly responsible for all the land that it owns.
It's like a win-win for everybody.
That's what this says. That's what the article.
We get another visitor center on the monopoly board on a side that we don't even have one on yet. I don't think we have one in Wyoming. Do we yet?
I don't think so. I don't know.
No, we need one in Wyoming.
Yeah. Martin's Cove holds deep significance for Latter-day Saints because it was the refuge for members of the ill-fated Martin Handcart Company, the Willie Martin Handcart Company, during the devastating winter of 1856. Today, more than 100,000 visitors come each year, with thousands of Latter-day Saint youth participating in handcart treks designed to connect them with their pioneer heritage. Church representatives say visitors wouldn't notice much difference if the ownership changes, because the church is already leasing the land. They're already doing tours on the property. They're already doing church history conversations there.
So they already have missionaries there.
They probably already have missionaries there, yeah.
Unless that's against the terms of the lease, I don't know.
Yeah, they've got historical markers. They've got a visitor center. In fact, the visitor center was on that previous slide right down there at the bottom. Mormon Handcart Visitor Center.
Can you let us know in the live chat if they got missionaries at Martin's Cove if you've been there?
Well, they're going to be there now if this happens. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
They church representatives say visitors wouldn't notice much difference if the ownership changes. They argue the church could better preserve the site, invest in its long-term care, which I really believe. I believe the church would do a better job caring for the property if they owned it rather than leased it. And they could improve the visitor experience without the uncertainty that comes with changing federal policies. The proposal, though, isn't without historical baggage. 25 years ago, a similar effort was attempted to transfer Martin Cove to church leadership, and that ran into fierce opposition from conservation groups, Native American organizations, and others who argued that nationally significant historic sites should remain public land. The current proposal attempts to answer those concerns by framing the exchange as a win for everyone. You heard it from RFM first. The public would receive a valuable conservation and recreation land, while the church would gain permanent stewardship of a place central to its history. This made its way into 3 different news articles. News.com, I believe, was the one. Of course, the Salt Lake Tribune and the Deseret News also covered it. But that's that story. You know what? In this instance, RFM, I really think the church, I think this is a good deal for everybody all around. And I think the church would be best to have this property, and certainly because of its historical significance, would probably do an incredible job taking care of it. And the government doesn't lose out, and neither do the people, because they get 933 acres somewhere else. I'm assuming somewhat comparable in terms of the kind of land that it is. So your thoughts?
Yes, somewhere in New Mexico. But actually, I would agree with you with a caveat, which is this, is that I am aware of the historical significance of the place to Mormon history, because it's the place where a lot of Mormons died, because a Mormon apostle promised them that even though they were leaving late in the season, they were promised by a Mormon apostle that they would be able to arrive safely in Salt Lake City. And so it was because they were goaded on by an apostle of the Lord that they ended up dying there. So for these, among other reasons, I can see its historic significance to the LDS Church and its history. What I'm not aware of is the national historic significance of this location. And that's probably just, I don't know about it. But if there's a national significance to a location that, in some sense, approaches or is greater than, a church, um, I could understand that argument. In other words, a church doesn't get little bighorn just because the Book of Mormon says that Joseph Smith rode a white buffalo there.
Right. So the question is whether there are other historical significance there beyond the Mormon experience. And not that that's necessary. It could just be a Mormon historical thing and still have significance to as a national historical site for sure. But I'm not aware of what other things are in that area that the government would see it as having historical significance outside of Mormon history.
Hmm. Okay. I
All right.
mean, are they doing tours alongside the Mormon tours that are happening there? I don't know.
Yeah, as far as I know, that's not the case. As far as I know, it is just a Martin's Cove. In fact, I was just going to put up here. Let me put this on the other screen. Take this down. I'll add this to the stage. So this is the National Park Service, Martin's Cove, Mormon Trail site. Of course, the church has their own website URL for the Martin's Cove visitor information, but you can just see they've got a write-up on it. They also say here, I'm reading here at the bottom, nearby the reconstructed Fort Seminole and small museum are open to visitors. Monuments, memorials, and sculptures are found throughout the site. So it sounds like there's some Native American history here as well. Site information. You get a few pictures down there. You've got the some people buried, grave sites of Mormon pioneers. You've got the Mormon Pioneer Trail, so that's marked. You've got the historic trail and some defensive breastworks, the Mormon Pioneer Trail, historical buildings as well. Richardson's Point sounds like it's another thing. So there are some other stuff there. But anyway, there's that.
That's great. I think those the Nephites built those defensive breastworks.
Yeah, if there's anything older than a couple of hundred years old, that's the interpretation that's going to be given to it. Talk about special interpretations. The next story I've got as well, just because Rebecca had a few there in between. I'll just note here for decades, the evidence that Joseph Smith practiced plural marriage has continued to grow. Yet a small group of believers, this is the polygamy deniers, a small group of believers and researchers still argue that Smith never actually practiced polygamy and that Brigham Young later invented the practice and falsely attributed it to Joseph. Now, that debate is about to get another major piece of evidence if you don't buy into Jeremy Hoop's unveiling of the Clayton diaries. LDS Church's Joseph Smith Papers Project is preparing to publish the complete journals of William Clayton, Joseph Smith's personal secretary, and historians expect that these will provide some of the clearest firsthand documentation yet tying Joseph Smith directly to plural marriage. This was covered in the news recently, Salt Lake Tribune,
Yes.
pointing to the fact that the William Clayton journals are about to come forward through the church. And so I'm hoping that we'll see actual images of the journal. I think those are important to helping sort of clarify some of these interpretations that are out there. So I'll just say that. And then let me get rid of something on my screen. William Clayton wasn't simply someone repeating rumors. He was, of course, one of Joseph Smith's closest associates. He acted as scribe and secretary. He kept daily journals. He participated in Nauvoo leadership and was himself a husband of plural wives. Historians have relied on portions of his journals for years, but many entries are said to have remained unpublished. And so scholars from across the spectrum expect these records to further corroborate what most professional historians already conclude. And by the way, I'm starting with the assumption that what Jeremy Hoop has released will accurately represent what's in the journals. I would be surprised outside of a few secondary notes made later on by historians or others looking at the journals. I would expect that what's been released is essentially all of the entries, but we're going to get to find out. And scholars from across the spectrum expect these records to further corroborate what most professional historians already conclude, that Joseph Smith secretly married dozens of women and privately taught plural marriage years before Brigham Young openly practiced it in Utah. Those who reject Joseph's involvement say they'll reserve judgment until they can examine the complete documents themselves. I'll save those guys time. You'll look at them and you'll still decide they can't possibly mean what everyone says they mean. So I'm not sure why you would need to reserve judgment until after you see them.
Jeremy's already made that decision. That much is clear. They're only saying this because it's what a rational person would say. They know that that's what a rational person would say, so they say it.
Right, but there is no evidence that could come forward outside of finding Joseph Smith's personal confession in his own handwriting, and even then, maybe we would find a loophole. So,
Well, even when Jeremy Hoop had, mentioned that he's got this transcript, right? It's the James V. Allen transcript, and he's got it right. And this is before he had released it during that interim. I knew immediately that in this transcript, Jeremy Hoop would find no evidence that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy. I may have said so publicly. That's an easy call. It doesn't make any difference what's in there. He will not see it. Jeremy Hoop will not see it as evidence that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, because that is the one conclusion that no evidence can lead to.
yep, 100%. So, for many Latter-day Saints, and by many, I mean those polygamy deniers, there is so much more. This is so much more than an argument about history. It's about the very precipice where one can no longer believe. Where is the very moment that the data becomes so overwhelming that it forces one to change their beliefs? And for those who deny Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, the driving issue often isn't the evidence itself, but the moral implications of accepting it. If Joseph was the architect of Nauvoo polygamy, then polygamy deniers must wrestle with its ethical problems. A simpler resolution is to conclude Joseph wasn't involved and that Brigham Young or others created the practice later. And from there, evidence is often interpreted through that conclusion rather than the conclusion emerging from the evidence. That's why it's unlikely that even significant new historical documents will settle the debate. The disagreement is as much about the framework people bring to the evidence as it is about the evidence itself. And there's Joseph Smith. Shh, don't tell anyone. You don't. I think you agree with me. This isn't going to change anybody's mind on that side.
No, they're beyond reason. They didn't reason themselves into this position in the first place. There's no way reason's going to get them out of it.
So true. Yeah, that's the
You know,
psychology of belief.
This article, it traced the history of this belief, and we've done it before. So I know that you and I thought we don't need to go over all those details again. And when I say that, I mean how it was that it was the Reorganites who were saying Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy, and the Mormons were saying he did. And then finally, the Reorganites stopped saying it in the 1960s or so because they realized the evidence was overwhelming. So they reversed themselves on it and agreed Joseph Smith did practice polygamy. The evidence is overwhelming. So now, in the last 10 years or so, now that it's coming out that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy and all the regular rank and file members are finding out about it who didn't really know about it before because they were just going on what they heard at church and it was never talked about. So now those people are saying they're taking up the old Reorganite position that Joseph Smith never practiced polygamy. By the way, on last Friday night, Sandra Tanner was on the show. She spoke eloquently at length about this subject, and she does not understand how it is that anybody can come to this conclusion that Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy. And the thing that really puzzles her, and that's on the evidence, and the thing that really puzzles her is how they can do that and ignore the theological problems that gives them with every Mormon prophet from Brigham Young on down to the current president, Dallin Oaks.
Yeah, how can one stay in the same system that they need to have apostatized away from the founder, having completely disobeyed God in his commandments of how to treat others and how to handle polygamy or monogamy, and then still believe those ordinances have some value or effect?
By the way, Bill, all those scandalous things that we were talking about in the it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was last week on Mormonism Live, about what's in the Clayton journals. Those stories with the
Moon Sisters.
yes, and Clayton wanting the third moon sister and the mother-in-law and all this stuff. All this stuff has been out in public for over 40 years. And that's one of the things that she had talked about, that everything that was sensational got leaked with a different transcript that came to them, and that they got sued by Andrew E. Hatt over and ultimately won on appeal. But yeah, and so of course, now this is being released over 40 years later. It's a different historian's transcript. And I mean a church historian's transcript of the same journal. But of course, if you're going to make an abridged journal, like I think the first one was, the Andrew E. Hatt journal, you're going to take out, okay, if I'm doing it, I'll just tell you, I'm going to take out all the parts where he says, I went here and I did this and I spent the afternoon drawing up deeds at Joseph's office and all the things that doesn't make any difference at all, okay? If I'm making a transcript for my own use, I'm going to focus on the things that are meaningful, that are interesting, that might end up showing up in a paper that I might write. So that's what happened with EHAT, I believe. So when that got leaked and then published by the Tanners, that was when they got sued for publishing it. When it got published and everybody could read about it, then that's how we knew about what was really in the William Clayton journals. So actually, this revelation of the James Allen journals is more extensive, but I don't think it's more interesting, because what it does is it keeps the interesting stuff that was already leaked over 40 years ago and adds back in all the stuff about I went to this place on this day and I spent the afternoon doing deeds at Joseph's house. You get all that stuff as well in the new transcript.
Yeah, all the scandalous stuff came out long ago.
Yes. So that's why we know about it. Okay, so let's see. Was there anything else?
Yeah, so we get to the end of that. But the next thing we've got, so we're pretty much to the end. Again, Rebecca had several stories tonight and not able to join us due to tech issues. So I'm going to take this down. Do you want to go into these? I know we talked about it beforehand, but we've got plenty of time. And so would you like to go into these?
I think it would be a sin if we shut down before 60 minutes was up at least. Yeah, there's 3 clips. Now, this is Chuck. Chuck had sent these to me and you, Bill, by text. And there were 3 clips that he had designated in this recent appearance by Jacob Hansen on the Mormonism with the Murph program. And the reason that Chuck sent them to us is because in the first clip, Jacob mentions you and me, Bill. This is the trigger warning. Yes, trigger warning. I said Jacob Hansen. You can see his face. You can see the smug look on his face. How much of a trigger warning do you need? Okay, trigger warning. It's Jacob Hansen trigger warning. The second clip, he's going to talk about John Dehlin. And the third clip, he's going to talk about somebody in Spain. So here's the first clip.
Discussion to be had about vaccines, but like they're like these hardcore weirdos that like reject modern medicine because modern medicine isn't infallible. How stupid is that? And now here's the thing: if you have a better alternative, like if you have a more wise spiritual God, well, pitch it to me. Like, remember Bill Reel and RFM and those types, you guys don't even believe in God. You don't believe in Jesus Christ. Like, you haven't even gotten to step 1. We're over here trying to figure out how to follow Jesus, and he's talking about prophets, and you guys are like, whoa, one time they, they thought something that wasn't true. It's like, and? It's like, oh, sorry, they don't bat 1,000. Like, you don't have any spiritual guidance. You don't even have moral agency in your worldview. Like, what are you talking about?
See, the first thought that comes to my mind is, I wonder how Jacob's doing with that trying to follow Jesus thing.
He didn't even have moral agency until David Bednar gave the church moral agency. Like, it's such an insane position. Again, if you could picture Jacob Hansen in the Jim Jones group or the Heaven's Gate group, this is the same kind of thing these people would say, unless you can bring me something better than what I have here inside Jim Jones's group, inside this Heaven's Gate, then, you don't even have religious beliefs, so you have nothing to offer me. And my question is, if your religion was not true, what would that look like? Because you're saying, oh, it bothers them that the prophets don't bat 1,000. Well, it's way worse than that. They're below the Mendoza line, and you didn't catch that. So there was
You told me what that was, and I looked it up, but I forgot. What is the Mendoza line?
A baseball player, I believe his first name is Lou. He's named Lou Mendoza. He hits around 200. And to be a Major League Baseball player, you got to at least be able to hit 220, 250, really 270 or higher. Mm-hmm. And if you're hitting below 200, you're below the Mendoza line. The accuracy with which prophets get things right. Again, Charlie Harrell has shown that every single doctrine in the church has changed. We can show that many of the changes happen under pressure from the wicked outside world, from the apostates standing on the outside of the church. And here's Jacob Hansen wanting to massage this argument to go like, they get it right 96% of the time, and you guys are so petty on picking on the 4. No, Jacob, the Book of Abraham isn't correct. The Book of Mormon contains so much 19th century material that Blake Ostler thinks it has to be an expansion product by Joseph Smith himself. Joseph doesn't use essentially the Nephite spectacles. Instead, he's using the seer stone from his treasure digging days. And strangely enough, treasure digging looks like a scam. And he looks like when the Book of Mormon comes along, he picked up right where he left off. And you can go on and on and on to the point where you would notice, as one who studies Mormonism, that prophets, seers, and revelators named George Albert Smith or Joseph Fielding Smith or David O. McKay, they have such a track record for getting things wrong. I find it difficult to figure out how you could place any trust in them to begin with.
Yeah, well, I think when he says they get most things right, what he means is they tend to agree with him. Oh, I'm sorry. I was writing something down.
No, it's me. He even goes so far in one of these clips to mention his collective witness model, but to put it into like the mouth of the correlated curriculum, put it on the church's side, rather than tell his audience like, hey, I invented this because this was the only way I could work around the problems and still come out a believer.
Yes, the Mormon prophets actually match the the method that I created to discover truth. So therefore,
Jacob must be a prophet.
I was going to say, therefore, they must be true, but you're right. You're right. He is the maker of prophets. He is the prophet maker.
Boy, oh boy.
All right. So there's another clip. This is about John Dehlin and navel gazing. And I think that, and once again, our good friend Jacob Hansen is running himself up the flagpole and saluting himself and making declarations about believing something so deeply that you would die for it.
And if you have some way of finding better spiritual truth, well, look within yourself. John Dehlin, all the best gurus have you look inwardly. Let me tell you what happens when people look inwardly. That philosophy doesn't actually manifest in good spiritual fruits. Okay? It manifests in a weird sort of self-centeredness. Yes. This incessant navel gazing that we do as human beings just ruins your society. Feels really good. You get to be the center of the universe. But what if you're supposed to live for something bigger than you? What if that's what a meaningful life is actually found in? What if that's exactly what Christ called people to? What if entire civilizations have been built, lives, everything that you stand on has been built on people that had that sort of a mindset, that they were going to live for something bigger. They were going to die for their country. They were going to die for what was right. And it's like, what kind of person are you going to be? A navel-gazing loser that's like, you're the center of the universe, or someone who's going to heroically die for something bigger than themselves?
The Jesus jihad. I hadn't heard of that before.
I watched these earlier.
Did you?
And I wouldn't even know where to start with Jacob. Having spent a lot of time in my life studying, for instance, secular Buddhism. Again, Anthony Miller, Jana Spangler, Brittany Hartley, and myself had 12 conversations around Jack Kornfield's work, Buddhism for Beginners. And there was so much in there that called on you to go in and to work on you in ways that Mormonism never even. Mormonism requires that you fit in rather than you belong. There is a specific code of how you can show up as a human being. And there are so many Mormons, we all know them. There are so many Mormons who wear a mask whenever they're showing up outwardly as a Latter-day Saint. They've never been given the safety to work on things inside of them. And so you see so many Mormons who, the Michael Kleiner story we covered a few weeks ago. You see so many Mormons who fit the part of doing the outward things that Mormonism requires, but never do any of the inner work to actually quiet the ego a bit, figure out how to be more authentic, honest, transparent, reduce suffering in the world. So Mormons show up. Yeah, they'll show up at the service project. Yeah, they'll pay their tithing. Yeah, they're keeping the word of wisdom. Yeah, they've got a temple recommend. But there are so many Mormons who are active, faithful, temple recommend holding, who have never spent really any depth of time tackling their behaviors, the mechanisms they built, dealing with trauma that they've incurred. And so I really struggle with Jacob snubbing his nose at people who have spent time in that work. Having been around a lot of those people, I see people who are much better human beings today than they were when they were inside that system. But he is so set that his idea of what's going on is true that he doesn't have the ability to be open to that at all.
No, and I think a good place to start would be identifying what drug of choice he's currently on, because that guy is on something, or he's jonesing for some more. Can you tell?
He's a strange fellow. Again, there's this debate where he looks at us and he goes, those guys are just dirty, rotten scoundrels. And I look at him and I go, that's a guy who has not worked on his ego at all in his life. And in his point of view is so arrogant, and he's so dead set on accomplishing whatever he sees as his motivation to accomplish. But I'm not going to convince him of that. He's so sure that I'm the bad guy, you're the bad guy, that there isn't any way to even meet in the middle and get him to be open about what's going on underneath his outer shell.
On the subject of Jacob Hansen's ongoing drug addiction, let's play clip 3 and see if you can see what I'm talking about. Here he's going to talk about Rebecca Biblioteca and how she focuses on the church lying about spires instead of the church lying about major social issues.
So here I am. And I would not only say that, oh, well, they just happen to be the most reliable. I'm like, no, they're very reliable on the things that matter. They're very reliable. And they're very consistent with what the collective witness of the prophetic tradition are. And people make a mountain out of a molehill every time there's some mistake. I mean, you have people like Rebecca Biblioteca out there, like doing a endless video series about the height of a steeple in Texas. I mean, like, it looks
that
silly
steeple did
at some
annoy me
point.
though. That steeple thing didn't. Annoy
That's
me.
fine. That's fine. It can annoy you. My whole thing is this: why does it matter to people like that? Why, in the big picture of life, in the big picture of the things that really matter and change the world, okay, in the big things of spiritual, like, wisdom, in the day and age of abortion all over the place, pornography, ruined families, declining birth rates, why are we spending any time at all on that? Well, it's because, well, maybe the prophets aren't totally reliable. Maybe the church isn't doing everything
Perfectly. It's hard to find a good cutting point for Jacob because he tends to bleed one sentence into the next. But I was going to say, did you catch how Murph said he was annoyed by the church. By the way, let's be clear about this, okay? Let it not be forgotten that this thing about the church, or excuse me, the temple spire isn't just the, well, for me, it's not just them running roughshod over the zoning because, I'm a lawyer and that's kind of another Tuesday. The thing that really hacks me off about it is the church directing its members to go in front of the city council and write to the city council to proclaim that it is the doctrine of the church that the height of the spire at the temple is essential to temple worship as it points our eyes up to heaven, when that has never, ever been an element of LDS belief since its inception until they wanted to get that Fairview temple built.
He says it is such a small thing that we're pointing out the dishonesty around the steeple. And yet it's such a great case study for what happens in Mormonism, which is a leader tells all the people down below what to do, and they all do it. And if that means that they join the Danites and they kill, so be it. If that means they make threats against people's life because Brigham Young teaches certain theology, they do it. If it means they leave Martin's Cove at the wrong moment, knowing their life is in peril, they do it. And there is something to be said about watching that whole steeple thing, which in the scheme of life is such a small thing. And yet, even in that moment, Mormonism called on its members to lie and to be dishonest and to create theology in the very moment and pretend that theology was far behind them. And if they'll lie about the tiniest of things, you can bet your rear end they've lied about the biggest of things.
Well, that was my next comment, because that's an old lawyer axiom. That's an old trial attorney axiom. If you lie about small things, you lie about big things.
And they do. They do. And it's documented and demonstrated hundreds of times that this institution, if it comes to protecting those 15 old men and protecting the system, they will do anything other than be accountable. And by the way, that's the very kind of opposite of inner work that I'm talking about. You look at men like Elder Oaks, who says, I wasn't at BYU when electroshock therapy happened. And then the Tribune comes out and goes, but you were. Would you like to comment again on that? And he's like, not saying a word. Yep. That's the kind of unhealthiness that you never dig into when you are an active, faithful, loyal, orthodox, believing Mormonism, true blue, dyed in the wool. All right, there's that. Those are your 3 clips. Anything else you want to say about that story?
Those are the 3 clips. And so anyway, Jacob, look, if you're not doing drugs, I apologize, but maybe you should consider it.
Yeah. I would at least suggest ayahuasca or a mushroom trip. I think those would be really good for you. They might do something other than make you more self-centered, because I think that would be really hard to happen.
Okay, I was thinking more, prescription, but okay, whatever you probably know, that would probably be a good idea for him.
You're concerned about him. I just want to see him grow.
Okay.
All right. Just coming from different values.
I think he's just jealous of Rebecca for winning that Ex-Mormon of the Year award, because I think he's going to win the same award within the next 5 years.
He might, but there are certain people who you're like, I don't think that shell will ever crack. The only thing that Jacob could have happen to him is the church do something so liberal that his own bigotry and prejudice demands that he take a stand. He almost did that if the church goes a little further on the LGBT issue. He kept telling everybody, look at how much confusion there is. If I keep doing podcasts about how confused we all are, maybe we'll all agree there's lots of confusion. And he seemed to be taking a stand that if we just went a little further and made gay marriage okay, accepted trans people fully, he was ready to call it quits. And I think that's the only way for a guy like Jacob to get him to deconstruct Mormonism is for the church to become healthier than he is. He needs the church to be just as dirty, unhealthy, and dishonest as he is, so that he can have something to say like, look, I fit right in. I must be a good guy.
Very good.
All
Now,
right.
Jacob Hansen is he's doing his thing, and he got in a huge fight with Kwaku the other night on Ward Radio, Psych Ward Radio.
That was fun to watch because Kwaku was on our team during that whole conversation. Kwaku's like, look, church has been wrong a million times. It was certainly wrong on the black issue. You don't think there's any room that it could be wrong on the LGBT issue? And Jacob's like, nope.
Nope,
And Kwaku's like, but yes, there is room for that. And so I have to give Kwaku sort of kudos. I think he's come a long way, and I think he is at a point in his life where he sees a lot of the problems, hence why just watching the way he dresses, he does not participate in Mormonism to the same degree that he did 5 or 6 years ago.
I like to think I've set a good example for the Quakester. You know, there's Jacob Hansen. I just want to point out this internal inconsistency. He's not even consistent with himself. Because throughout these clips, and probably in other places on that Mormonism with the Murph, God knows I didn't watch the whole thing. Thank you, Chuck, for doing it for me. He's going on and on about how, well, they may not be perfect, but they're pretty damn good. And they're the best thing that anybody could find anywhere on earth, said by a kid who's never looked anywhere outside of Mormonism for anything. Okay. But that's his standard. The thing I want to bring up is what you brought up is that this is the guy who also on every other episode talks about how divided and confused the church is because the leaders of the church keep sending conflicting messages about his favorite social issues. So when he says that they're as good as you can get in spiritual direction, these guys are closer to God than anybody. Oh my gosh, can't you tell that just when you look at President Oaks? But these guys are the best. And on the other hand, he talks about they're not the best because they're always confusing everybody and dividing us by giving us these conflicting messages. So I think he's conflicting with himself even, unless he thinks divided and confused is the best thing that's going on planet Earth.
Also a guy whose entire family has left the faith, right? His siblings are all gone. And again, I don't know the exact details, but I think even to some degree, his own wife doesn't adhere to Mormonism the way he thinks everybody should adhere to Mormonism. And so if everyone around you has stepped away and said, you know, Jacob, I'm your brother, I'm your sister, it doesn't add up. Like I looked into it, it just doesn't work. And you just keep insisting that it must. Like, of course, all high demand religions have people who believe it with all their heart and insist that it must be true and are willing to treat like crap everyone who figures out that it isn't. That's just the nature of high demand religion. I was just noting here, Rebecca is in the chat and she is noting some breaking news. So she must have stayed up instead of going back to bed. Rebecca, I don't have my phone on because I turned it off so I wouldn't get notifications, noises going on while I'm doing the show. But anything else you want to say, please do put in the chat. But she says here, Chubbuck leader who pled guilty to massages has plea deal denied. He is going to trial facing 150 years.
So this sounds like the story that I believe I did a couple of weeks ago about that individual. And these massages were with boys. This is a member of the church, obviously. I think a young men's leader, and having boys over to his house and giving them massages. And he was charged with a number of counts of sexual assault on these boys. And then a plea deal was proposed. I remember I was reporting on the plea deal, which were 4 counts of non-sexual assault on the boy so that he would not have to. Thank you, Mormonish. Hey, why don't you try and come on the show again? Let's see if you can make it this time. Oh, thank you. RFM was right. Yeah, I did call that. I didn't call that this would happen, but I'd said it could happen. And the judge does have the power to deny a plea deal that's been put together and agreed to by the parties. So that blew up. And now, it'll either go to trial or they'll get together again and come up with something and, you know, massage the plea deal so that the judge will accept it.
All right. Well, there's that. Okay. Let me skip ahead here.
I have been there before. I've had a judge refuse to accept the plea deal.
He pled guilty, didn't have to register, but they did not accept the plea deal. So he will face those charges. He'll get his day in court.
Well,
I get it.
If he pleaded guilty, the deal is done. There's only sentencing left. There's no trial left. He's pleaded guilty.
Yeah, it says here the judge did not accept the plea deal because I think the decision was so lenient. But you're right. You don't get to take your plea off the table, at least not necessarily.
No, you don't. Once your plea has been entered formally and according to the Constitution, it is now done.
Yeah.
And you can make a motion to have it undone, but in most normal states, I understand there may be a different one or two out there. I think it was one of the members of Mormonism After Dark who mentioned that. But I think the standard, no, you can bring a motion, but there has to be a basis for it. You have to prove that there's something that you did not understand about this deal or this plea that the Constitution requires you to know and understand about for it to stand. Otherwise, it's set in stone and it's not going to get withdrawn.
Yeah, it's one of these.
You texted me the article. My phone's back there. You want me to go get that, Bill?
You can if you want to. I can tell people about the cruise while you're doing that.
Oh, great. This will be super.
All right, awesome. All right, folks, we've got the Post-Mormon Celebration Cruise coming up. This is going to be so much fun. It is just around the corner. We are almost at the end of July. We're going to jump then into August. And before you know it, it's going to be September 13th, 2026. This year, we'll be embarking from Long Beach near Los Angeles, California. We're going to get on the Carnival Panorama. That's the name of the ship. We're going to travel a couple of days at sea. Then we're going to go to Cabo San Lucas, Mazatlan, Puerto Vallarta, and then we're going to have some other fun days at sea. And then we'll finally come back on September 20th. And we've got tons of people going that you all know, folks who have been highly helpful, influential on your faith journey as you've deconstructed Mormonism and hopefully moved on to a bigger, better life. That's what this is about. This is a post-Mormon celebration cruise. Go to khegseth.travel.com/post-mormon-celebration-cruise. Register today. We've got over 200 people going. Over 100 rooms are booked. So get your cabin today, and we're going to have a ton of fun. We'll be on excursions, so you can pick an excursion, or you can pick a person among the influencers that you want to go on the excursion with. You can meet us on the boat. We'll set some times aside that I'll be by the pool, or I'll be doing karaoke, or I'll go to the stand-up comedy, and you can come sit by me. If you find RFM, you can go sit by RFM. But everybody will be on the ship there at the bottom that you see: Sam Young, Dr. John Lundwall, Dr. Randy Bell, Dr. Julie De Azevedo, Ganesh Cherian, Jana Spangler, Charlie Harrell, Landon Brophy, and of course, Rebecca, RFM, and myself. So do register today, khegseth.travel/post-mormon-celebration-cruise. Today's the day to do it. Register today. Mr. Radio Free Mormon, you've got a chance to look at that article. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. So this is 4:00 today, Mountain Time, I think. July 20th. Yep. This is the East Idaho newspaper, Logan Ramsey, East Idaho News, Dateline Pocatello. A judge did not accept the guilty plea. He had not pleaded guilty yet. Of a former church leader who was accused of committing sexual abuse against multiple minors. Virgil Larson, that's the LDS church leader who's charged, 47, had a court hearing Monday morning, that's today, where he attempted to plead guilty to 6 amended counts of felony injury to a child. See, no sexual component there, so he wouldn't have to register. He made this plea in exchange. You see, it's the language. He didn't make a plea. In exchange for having this previous charges reduced, which were 6 counts of felony sexual abuse of a child. This plea deal would not have required Larson to register as a sex offender. EastIdahoNews.com first became aware of this plea agreement in May, reporting on court records that showed the agreement had been signed on May 26th. But after hearing Larson's account of the events that led to these charges, Judge Robert Naftz, Naftz, did not find the amended charges appropriate. So who's Larson? Is he the prosecutor? Let me see here. No, that's the defendant, Virgil Larson. But after hearing Larson's account of the events, was he speaking? I can't imagine he was speaking. Anyway, maybe they're talking about what happened. The attorneys were. Anyway, This is because, based on how Larson claimed his interactions with the victims occurred, it wouldn't meet the definition of willfully under the law. Nafts, the judge, explained. They're probably going off the affidavit of probable cause. The law requires more than a purpose or willingness to commit the act. The state is required to show the defendant had knowledge of the consequences, Naft said. Okay, so basically they just have to redo the language for the defendant on the guilty plea statement in order to take care of that, I'm guessing. I'm not sure. It looks like a relatively easy fix. At the time when Larson was accused of having committed these crimes, he was a first counselor in the bishopric, it says leadership of his local ward, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which takes up one whole line in this news article. In total, 7 victims, one of them an 18-year-old, came forward during Larson's investigation, which was initiated in July 2024 after the Bannock County Sheriff's Office was informed that 3 of the victims reported the abuse to their ward bishop through the Curtin McConkie Law Office, which represents the LDS Church. Okay, I'm not going to be able to understand everything on this. I'm just reading it for the first time. I just don't understand what that line even means. That 3 of the victims reported the abuse to their ward bishop through the Curtin McConkie Law Office. I mean, don't you talk to your bishop and then he's the one who calls the Curtin McConkie Law Office? I don't know. During the investigation, a pattern emerged in what the victims reported to authorities and to their bishop, saying that Larson had touched them inappropriately while giving them massages at his private residence while they were naked. Court documents stated that victims reported the massage being done on the naked body, focusing on the buttocks. During Monday's hearing, Larson gave his own version of the events that led to his criminal investigation. Larson framed his actions as offering athletic and therapeutic help rather than abuse. He claimed that he first learned deep tissue manipulation to address medical conditions faced by his children, who were athletes. He then went on to claim that the victims had requested massages from him after they heard from one of the boys in their social circle about how Larson had helped relieve his injury and keep competing over the course of multiple sessions. He asked if there was something I could do, and so I said yes, Larson asserted. Later, Larson said, and over a period of time, they all requested to have something done to a similar effect. Okay, it's going to go on here, and I think that what happened, I'm looking to see if there's anything else that I'm missing here. The last paragraph says there's only like 5 left. Though Larson has been charged with these crimes, that doesn't necessarily mean he committed them. So that's the presumed innocent part of the story at the end. I think that what happened, and this happens on occasion, is that this fellow Virgil Larson, who's pleading guilty, he's got a really good deal. I have no idea what's going on. The buttocks makes it, of course, always a question, right? Is this legitimate or is this sexual in nature? It's not like other parts of the body where the sexuality of it would be readily obvious and you could count on a jury, even in spite of a defense attorney's most eloquent argumentation, to find that, yeah, there's a sexual interest there. But he's got this thing where he's charged with assault and he's talking to the judge. He's giving his version of it, right? And I don't know if he's talking or if it's in writing or if he's reading what he wrote. Regardless of what he did, he made it too easy on himself. He made himself look too good in what he said. What I mean by that is a judge has to find, when you're pleading guilty, has to find from the facts the elements of the crime that you're pleading guilty to. That's one of the constitutional safeguards to keep people from pleading guilty to stuff that they're not guilty of. But he didn't do that. In other words, he gave this recitation of what happened that did not match the reduced charges that he was supposed to plead guilty on. Because of that, it blew up, and these things will happen. And so his attorney's probably yelling at him saying, why didn't you say what I told you to say? You know, you can't do this. You've got to take responsibility for it. You're going to have to say words that do that. Otherwise, you're going to go to trial and you're looking at 150 years, pal.
Interesting. You know, I remember, not only this story, but then there's the other story with the dentist who's doing vaginal exams for high school sports physicals. If you remember that one. And, as Jacob Hansen gets on his high horse about how healthy and how much growth Mormons experience, we run into these stories week after week after week.
Mm.
And to me, to sit back and go, Mormonism hardly has problems compared to all of these ex-Mormons who have left religion entirely and are so self-centered. It's a strange thing to keep saying things like that when we watch week in and week out active, faithful, temple-worthy Mormons making really bad decisions, lacking the ability to sort of make sense of how they should show up in the world in a healthy way.
Similarly, I think a jury would have no problem finding sexual intent from a dentist conducting vaginal exams on his patients.
Yeah, I mean, if you have kids in your home and you've got them naked and you're doing massages on them and you're touching their butt, I just can't imagine a world where anybody goes, that seems reasonable. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. I can't figure that out for the life of me, but this guy better get it figured out, because 150 years is a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cops aren't beating him with the rubber hoses. His lawyer is, I guarantee.
Yeah, well, there's that. Okay. It's not good to be in prison when you're in trouble for those kinds of things, mister. So there's that. All right, stuff coming up this week. We've got Rebecca's got this coming out on Tuesday, tomorrow night, The Religious Mythology of America's Founding with Warren Throckmorton and Unoriginal Jim. So that should be a really exciting episode that Mormonish is putting on. And then she also has another thing that she's doing too, Green Eggs and Ham in Ancient Temple Text with Dr. John Lundwall. And she says Dr. Lundwall is going to demonstrate for us that Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham, by the same standards that apologists use with the Book of Mormon and other ancient texts that they try to draw these connections to, that just in the same way, Green Eggs and Ham is an ancient temple text, and Dr. John Lundwall will demonstrate that. So that should be a ton of fun as well.
Well, with it being ham, I hope it's not a Jewish ancient temple text.
Just kosher for Mormonish. Mormonish does just kosher episodes, so our Jewish friends can enjoy. Wednesday, RFM?
Mormonism Live, we are putting together an incredible panel. In fact, it's so big, it's a question whether it's even going to fit on the stage, but we're going to make sure it does. We're going to have a 5-person panel, and we are going to talk about a lot of really interesting things. I finally got the thumbnail ready to go, and we're in the process of ironing this out and making sure that this is going to be one for the record books. We're going to have 5 people on the panel, in addition to Bill and I, which means we're not going to be doing a lot of talking, I think, and all to the better. And we're going to hear about the Black experience in the Mormon Church from 5 Black members or ex-members of the LDS Church come to tell their story and to talk with each other about their experiences. And we'll be able to listen in, and I think it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, I'm really excited to listen, and I think that's a big thing for all of us who tune into that show. I'll be lucky to have a front row seat, but for us to listen to the experiences of others and to learn something from those. So I'm excited for that conversation.
It started with Black Priesthood and Summer. They had a friend of theirs that I did not know who wanted to maybe come on the show and talk. And then another friend found out and wanted to come on the show. And then another friend found out and wanted to come on the show. So that's how we ended with 5 people. One of them in, good heavens, where is she? She's in a place where she's going to be up at 2:00 in the morning. I don't know if it's Spain or somewhere in that time zone.
Well, there's that. So folks, tune in Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Mountain Time for that. And then Thursday, this is something I've been sitting on for a while. I needed some things to happen in the background where the people that I had conversations with would feel safe having the final conversation be released publicly. And that finally, I got the okay for that. So Thursday morning, this will replace the Logical Deconstruction series, which I'll pick up here in a week or two. But this was really important. I sat down with 2 different people. One person was a client of Jody Hildebrandt, and another person had a really unhealthy Mormon therapist involved in their custody trial, custody court case. And when you see the patterns that show up in Jody Hildebrandt, in this other person who's a therapist in Utah, and then I also collected from our audience, from people who follow me on Facebook and other places, I got input from you, the listener, about your experiences with Mormon therapists, Mormon health professionals, and I share some of those as well. And so this is a long episode. This is going to be somewhere in the range of like 3.5 hours long, but it is two really important conversations with two people who experienced firsthand trauma when they should have been dealing with a professional therapist who operated by those professional standards. Instead, what they got was a Mormon who happened to be licensed in that therapeutic modality, but who showed up with their Orthodox Mormonism shaping everything they did in a situation, and Jody Hildebrandt being one of those. So tune in Thursday. It should be 9 a.m. For that episode.
That sounds really exciting. You know, this Friday, we're going to have another episode of Mormonism After Dark. We'll see if I have a co-host. I doubt if I can find one as illustrious as this past Friday. Maybe there will be no co-host. Maybe there will. I've got a couple of lines in the water. But last Friday, we had Sandra Tanner on. It was absolutely fantastic, I think. And we had a great conversation. And she got to talk about her experience in, she's had so many experiences around important events in Mormonism, but this particular one was back in the 1980s when she got sued for publishing the or excerpts from the William Clayton Journal, the transcript, the EHAT, the Andrew EHAT transcript that had been leaked at that time. And a fantastic story.
Excellent. All right. And then you also got, so you talked about Mormonism After Dark. You had Sandra on last week. This week, you've got some lines in the water. We'll see if anybody bites, but should be a great show. Friday, 8 p.m. Mountain Time for that.
I think so. RFM last Saturday. RFM does the Book of Mormon. I like that thumbnail. I know it doesn't look quite like me. It doesn't look quite as good as I look. Not as handsome, but I still like that thumbnail.
It's a great hood ornament.
Yes. Thank you. I made that myself.
I
Out
love
of
it.
gold or Tumbaga.
No, great hair, my friend. RFM does the Book of Mormon. This came out last Saturday. I'm sure you'll have something this Saturday for us as well.
Oh, it's going to be great. And I think that this Saturday I'm going to be able to get around. There's going to be new stuff. It's going to be about our president. Oh, Captain, my Captain, Dallas Oaks. And the thing about him is, let me just tell you that, you remember the Josiah Stoll hearing? The Joseph Smith trial about Josiah Stoll, and where Josiah Stoll testified that even though Joseph Smith couldn't find a lick of treasure on repeated attempts, that Josiah Stoll was still absolutely convinced and swore to it in open court that he did have that power. And that I concluded from that one thing we can say about Joseph Smith is that he had the unusual ability of being able to convince some people that he had supernatural powers while presenting no evidence of having those supernatural powers, and in fact failing every test of having those supernatural powers. He could still convince some people that he had those supernatural powers to the point they were willing to swear on a Bible in open court to that effect. That's Joseph Smith. Did you want to say something about that?
That's a unique gift to have, and wonder what one would do with the rest of their life after their teen years of carrying out such a thing on people. I wonder what they would do in their 20s and 30s and 40s. That would be interesting, huh?
It's almost as good a gift as turning invisible.
Yeah.
Sorry, what, Bill?
If they make it to their 40s.
Oh, right. 38 and a half. Unfortunate. But all I'm saying is about Dallas Oaks is that I've realized, I'm going to present the evidence for this proposition, is that Dallas Oaks is the kind of guy, like that was the kind of guy Joseph Smith was. Dallas Oaks is the kind of guy who will try to get you to believe something, even though he knows it isn't true. That's what I'll be demonstrating on the next Radio Free Mormon.
That sounds good. All right, there's that. And then I'll just say, this past Sunday, I started another series. This is the LDS Missionary Discussions, If the Church Was Honest.
How many series are you doing?
Well, I'm trying to put lots of little coals in the fire and reach people through different kinds of content. So I sit down, I dress in a suit and tie. I'm putting on the missionary image. I've got a name tag on the screen in the top right corner. And Elder Reel sits down and presents the missionary discussion. I don't change the doctrine. I don't change the theology. I only say if the church was healthy and responsible and honest about its theology and doctrine, how would it present that? And let the viewer make the observation of the differences between how a good, healthy person would share that and how the church does it, and see if how the church does it bothers you. So that's that. And the next one will be coming out this Sunday morning at some point, probably around 9 a.m. So it's already in the queue.
Did you memorize the discussions word for word? That's what I want to know.
No, I did back in the day. I never was a missionary, but I went out with the missionaries so much. And so I remembered like the Joseph Smith story. And I remembered the first discussion. We all believe in a supreme being. And though we know him by different names, we know that God lives. So I worked really hard to be able to sit with the missionaries, taking them out. I was the assistant ward mission leader, and to be able to share that with investigators, having some resemblance of someone who knew what they were doing. But no, this is a complete rewrite of the discussions where we tell you the truth. We value informed consent. We value an honest, forthright depiction of what you're about to join. I don't feel the need to tell you everything. I don't think the missionaries are responsible to tell you everything, but I do think they're responsible to tell you some things. And those are the things that we tell you in this series. So join it Sunday, 9 a.m. for the second discussion. I think there's 9 of them total. I think I needed an extra 1 or 2 or 3 to be able to get in the material that the church doesn't want to share.
Yeah, there's more they're not telling you than they are.
That's right. So there's that. I think that's it. So the last thing we've got here, we're just 4 days away from Pioneer Day. Pioneer Day is this cool thing in Utah. If you live outside of Utah, and we've got a lot of Never Mormons who have who join our show and watch. Pioneer Day is a celebration of the saints going from Illinois out to Utah. That whole trek and all the sacrifice that was made. But we also have in the ex-Mormon community, the post-Mormon community, we have a celebration called Pie and Beer Day. And so there in the little image there is RFM holding a beer, me with a slice of pie, and Rebecca with the whole pie. I don't know where I got my slice from because hers hasn't been tampered with. But Pie and Beer Day, I've already seen some Pie and Beer Day parties happening down here in southern Utah. So whether you're enjoying Pioneer Day or Pie and Beer Day here at the Mormon Newscast, we hope that you have a great day off and enjoy the holiday one way or another. Any final comments from you, Mr. Radio Free Mormon?
Yeah, you know, I like pie as much as the next guy. Maybe not as much as Dean Winchester, but as much as the next guy, I like pie. And beer's not so bad. I can drink beer on a hot day, but together, pie and beer, I'm not sure I could go for that.
Pie is for breakfast and for dessert late into the evening, and then beer the rest of the way through the day.
If we can separate it somehow, maybe I can get on board.
Yeah, if you could put whipped cream on the pie, I think you'll manage.
By the way, who's going to be the Grand Master for the Days of 47 parade through Salt Lake City on Friday? Friday's the 24th, I think, Pioneer Day. That's the question. Now, apparently, a few years ago, D. Todd Christofferson was the Grand Marshal, but I think they're going to do it again just to give us the middle finger once more.
I will say, I didn't get any comments from you, but did you think it was odd right in the middle of the Wade Christofferson situation where he has pled guilty? Did you find it odd that Quentin Cook on his own Facebook profile on his Facebook page chose to put out a video of himself criticizing critics for speaking out against the character of Joseph Smith and essentially saying like Joseph Smith was incredible again, Joseph Smith being one who groomed children at the same time that D. Todd's brother is pleading guilty to the charge? Did you see that as intentional or strange?
You know, I know that you did, and I want to be sensitive to that because you frequently see things that I don't. In this case, I look at it from Cook's point of view, and he would not be thinking of Joseph Smith in the same way as Wade, I think. So I think it was probably just another hurrah for Joseph Smith kind of post.
Yeah, maybe. All right, folks, we'd love to see your comments and thoughts there in the live chat. If you're watching this later, put your comments down below. If you have news, please do reach out to us on our Facebook page. The Mormon Newscast is there. It's got its own Facebook page. You can go there and let Rebecca, RFM, and myself know what's happening. We do appreciate it. Some of the stories that we were into this week were because you guys shared with us what was going on, namely Rebecca sharing with her what was going on. And so we appreciate that. It does help us make sure that we're aware of all these stories when they're happening if you reach out. So please do. Again, leave your comments down below. Please like and subscribe. And please don't hesitate to leave a donation. I'm going to put this back into the chat one more time. These are the donation links, and there's two of them. So Rebecca has a donation link to Mormonish, and we've got a donation link to our channel, Mormon Discussion. So if you want to donate to RFM and myself, it's the donor box link there in the chat. I'll put this up on the screen. It's the link there that's the donor box / the Mormon Newscast, and then Rebecca's Mormonish one is the next one, donor box / Mormonish podcast. And so you can make a donation to either of those or both. We certainly love that. And please go to each other's YouTube channel and subscribe if you haven't done that already. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next Monday for our next episode of the Mormon Newscast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.